Welcome, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Analytic Minds podcast. Today, I've got with us Alex Moy, and Alex is working in a large financial institution in the United States and has some really unique perspectives on some BI challenges and BI topics, especially when two organizations are merging together, which is something that is really relevant to the business, so to his business right now. So, Alex, why don't you just maybe give a better introduction, an overview of some of the things that you're dealing with day to day in your particular role in your business. I think it'll be good to kickstart things like that, and then we'll just see what topics we can dive into after.
Okay, thanks, Sam, for having me on the podcast. Alex Moy here with Truist Financial, and we are the combined company of Heritage BB&T and Heritage SunTrust organizations in the United States. And I am the Assistant Vice President over the BI Center of Excellence, heading up enablement, self-service business intelligence, and strategy, as well as the user group community. How do we engage, and how do we increase adoption of our BI tools and foster a collaborative community for analytics across the organization? Great.
And it's quite, obviously there's a really unique aspect to this. There's been two already large financial institutions come together, and that was quite recent, right? Has it been mainly? Did that happen this year?
So it was actually finalized in December of last year.
Okay,
and,
right.
And a bulk of the announcements and a bulk of the changeovers have been occurring in this year. So very close. Mm-hmm.
And just to give everyone a bit of scope, what's the total headcount number in the new Truist organization?
So I can tell you what the number was around the time of the merger, and we were both about 30,000 person organizations, a little bit above, and since that time, I think we're right under 60,000 teammates.
Wow!
And so, still a very, very large organization. There's a lot of personnel, there's a lot of change management, a lot of culture that has to take place. And part of what we're doing cultural is also just being very intentional about how do we create a data-driven culture? How do we become more digitally minded and data-minded? And so when you have a merger, because so many things are changing, you really do have a great opportunity to not just lift and shift, but actually change your mindset about how you approach things. And so we've had a lot of opportunity for growth.
Right. And so 60,000 employees. So that would make you, I would presume, one of the largest financial institutions in the United States. I mean, probably in the world, to be honest.
Yeah, so combined, that puts us as the sixth largest commercial bank in the U.S.
Right.
And so we have quite the size and scale.
Right. So you've got a more commercial focus rather than a retail bank. Is that right?
So we have both. We have a community bank, we have a commercial bank, and we actually have an insurance brokerage as well, which is we are one of the largest insurance brokers in the globe across the world as well. So we have several holdings in that side of the business as well.
Right. Now, when you're working in an organization this large, and this is, obviously this is not a situation that everyone finds themselves in, but I think it would be quite interesting to learn about, like, where do you start so you're in your business, your BI Center of Excellence. You've got this huge organization. You've got lots of different business functions, regional teams, different IT infrastructure. Where do you actually start? I mean, you've obviously got this goal of self-enablement, self-service, but how do you get everyone to buy into what you're trying to do in such a large organization?
I think that's a really interesting question because that's something that we've asked ourselves many times. How do we pursue this? Where do we start? And there's two parts. One is the journey that we had prior to the merger. So prior to the merger, there was not a official center of excellence to really pursue self-service BI, and we really developed that. We put together a charter, we put together a proposal, and the tool that we use is Tableau. So a lot of your audience might be familiar with Tableau, and we positioned it as, hey, we're going to do things a little bit different because BI traditionally has been ran by the IT shop, right? It's an IT tool, and it required a lot of technical expertise. So what did every other analyst in the bank use? They used Excel, right? And when you are trying to manage data, this is a data governance, data management strategy. You have to think about how do we purvey data so that there is one version of the truth, right? So there's a data quality issue. And with Excel spreadsheets floating around, you have no control, no data governance. And so we said, there's got to be a better way. And our thought process was, if they already are going to do the work themselves, the reporting, the data manipulation, then why not meet them where they're at? And we picked a tool like Tableau, which meets you where you're at. And so what we did is we brought in, we had that time had about 30 different lines of businesses, and we brought in a little bit more than half of them. And we brought in one analytics lead or business manager and asked them to bring one developer. And we just put together training. And we said, listen, we're going to give you guys this training, but this room represents all the different analytical units across the organization. So how do we create a cross-functional community that collaborates and shares best practices and just foster analytics and innovation? And so that was really the birth of the Center of Excellence, which is bringing that people together around the technology, but using that as the catalyst to have that conversation. And so more than just the technology, it was bringing those people into one room and having a conversation, that you had the technical developer and as somebody that was a leader in the strategy component. And when we brought them together, there was so much synergy that came out of that 1 3-day workshop training that they said, can we do this on a quarterly basis? Can we do this on a regular cadence? And we thought through, okay, this is great. This is what we want. How do we continue to foster this? How do we continue to have collaborative meetings and also share the best practices and whatnot? And that's really where that Center of Excellence concept came out of.
That's brilliant. That is some really valuable ideas there. And so have many people did you actually have to get together? I mean, so you said you had 30 business lines. So did you basically, did you have to get sort of 60 to 100 people together in a room to try and get all the buy-in from all these disparate teams and business functions, etc.?
So for that training, that meeting, we had about 20 lines of business represented, and probably 35 people in the room. It was a crowded meeting room,
right?
But it was very good conversation, and if nothing else, just connecting people that were doing similar work across the organization, because they didn't have a chance to get to know each other otherwise. So by putting them on the same tool, you almost forced them to connect, and that led to just faster training, faster learning, faster development across the board. So Tableau is a great tool in itself, but when you put a bunch of really smart people in the same room talking about the same tool, you just start to see greater and greater synergy.
Right. And so you got everyone into the same room. What was it all just training on Tableau, or did you have some strategic discussions? Did you did you do a bit of long-term planning? What exactly did you find valuable during that time when everyone was together?
So, as I was saying before, the old way of doing BI was IT centric. And so as part of the kickoff, as part of the agenda for this 3-day training, it was, we are doing BI differently. We're giving you the power to do business intelligence dashboarding locally on your desktop, essentially. And we want to be a partner. We want to support you. And so we were now going out to the line of business and saying, hey, how do we enter into this collaborative relationship with you where IT in the past might have been a bottleneck because all the centralized resources, all the requirements gathering, all the BA, DA type work, business analyst, data analyst type work that had to take place. And then maybe some modeling, maybe some data engineering had to occur, ETL, before they could even get a clean data set, right, to build a report. And that process was 6-9 months. And that's just not the speed that business works, right? That the business units need the information today, tomorrow. They can't wait months and months. And so our goal was to shift the conversation and say, hey, I know you can't wait that long. I want to meet you where you're at. So we're going to give you a tool, we're going to give you a training, and we're going to give you that capability. The value proposition or the promise in return was that you guys are going to leverage the server environment that we've provided for you guys. And over time, we're going to help you automate and improve data quality by sourcing it from us, the Enterprise Data Office. So it was a give and take. So now we had more transparency, more auditability of what teams were doing throughout the line of business. But now they also had the control to do it as quickly as they could deliver, as quickly as they could develop. We still had the governance control of having an audit trail of pushing to production. So we still have some control, but they operate really in their own sandbox. They could do whatever they want. They had their own site. They control permissions. They had their own governance, own security, and everything. And we only maintained the infrastructure to support them.
Right. And how was that transition? So you had this 3-day workshop. You had these discussions. Obviously, you got a little bit of buy-in. Was it as easy as sort of flicking a switch and everyone just switched over to this new sort of self-service model, or were there some ongoing challenges with it?
Yeah, there's definitely some ongoing challenges, and I think anytime you introduce a new tool, new technology, you have different adoption rates. So some teams were very quick to move and very, very successful, and there was others that, whether it was challenges in the business itself or the data quality, data volume, or existing tooling that they're using, it just made migration challenging. And so for them, some of it might have been budgetary constraints. They didn't have the resources, whether it was in terms of teammates or actual dollars, to make the investment. And that's a tough pill for some lines of businesses. And we try to meet them where they're at, but they have to, at the end of the day, make the decision for themselves, what's right for them. And so that was the challenge that we faced, I think, in the very early days of building out this concept of self-service enablement. But we are now in a merger, and one of the benefits of the merger is that Tableau was selected as one of those tools that we were going to use for self-service enablement. And so there's a lot of efforts to then migrate existing reports to our target state tools, right? And so that kind of cost constraint went away for a lot of these teams. And so we're actually seeing quite a bit of acceleration into adopting Tableau, into moving into more self-service. And it's just incredible because there was so much pent up demand. People have been wanting to be able to do it on both sides of the organization, Heritage, SunTrust, Heritage, BB&T. And now because of the merger and because there's funding available for it, everybody wants to get access to these tools. And it's wonderful. And I know I'm talking about the tool a lot, and I think it's really a catalyst. But there's also been a lot of more behind the scenes roadmap strategy planning that had to go along in order to make that possible, right? In order to enable that adoption of the tooling.
No, look, to me, it makes complete sense to mention the tool quite a lot because, obviously with Enterprise DNA, we've got more of a Power BI focus, but I think that the tools are what are really enabling, that they are truly enabling the self-service movement, because historically you didn't have the ability to, in any sort of optimized way, manage data, analyze data, distribute data, which is, all such key points, parts of making, a data culture more prevalent, throughout an organization. One really interesting question that comes to mind when you talk about, empowering a sort of self-service movement is, and especially in a large organization. I mean, what are sort of the numbers that are you sort of talk? Because I know you brought your core team together, but obviously they're not the ones developing every single report. So, how many people do you ultimately need to upskill here to get everyone to sort of eventually leave Excel behind?
So I don't know about leaving the Excel part behind, because everybody, analysts love their Excel, and I like Excel myself too. But I hear you. There's still a challenge for that, and we're getting, I think, to a tipping point where incremental demand month over month is actually coming down. So, I think we're actually doing well in terms of saturating our development demand, in terms of head count, in terms of license count. I won't go into maybe the exact numbers on, how many people I think will be like our saturation point. But, what I'll say is that I think we had that core group. And out of that core group that we started off with, we identified very early on that there was about 4 lines of businesses that were going to be very successful early adopters, right? So we helped them be as successful as possible and made them champions of the tool. So the folks that were excelling then began to teach the rest of their team, the rest of their organization, how to make the most and leverage this tool. So identifying those champions was really a key step. And then pouring as much time, attention, resources to making them successful was my focus early in. And as they became more successful, then the story of self-service became more visible. Right. So we were able to take their success stories, broadcast it to a wider audience, and say, listen, this is what this technology enables you to do. And by the way, this team, and this team are doing these things with it. And this is the ROI. This is the measurable outcomes. These are the different dashboards that they've automated. These are the hours saved. This is the risk reduced. Right. We came up with ways to measure the impact and tell that story. And as we continue to tell the story, more teams would come to us, leadership would come to us proactively and say, how do we get our teams on this? Or my developers are asking for this. What is this tool going to allow us to do? And so as we had more of those conversations, we went from here's how to build a report, here's how to build a dashboard, here's how to use a tool, to say, okay, leadership team for this line of business, help us understand what are the decisions you're trying to make. right? Help us understand your strategy and how analytics plays a role into that. Okay, now that we understand these decisions, help us understand what numbers, what metrics help you make that decision. Because now we can tell you that you should make these 5 dashboards because that's going to help you inform your decision. And based off of those dashboard requirements, your team will need to get these data sources here, this data set over here. We worked backwards to help them understand their needs from a data and analytics component. And that enabled their teams to be more successful. And so we really moved from a technical implementation consultative role into more of a strategic, how do we enable the line of business to think about data? How do they think about their decision making? So we use a D3 framework, data-driven decisions, right? And we really start at the decision making and we work backwards from there.
That's really, really interesting. And I just want to touch on one point that I found enlightening that you mentioned just at the beginning of that answer, where you said that you really focused initially on the champions. You found the champions, brought them into your core group, and then just focused on them. And I think that's really interesting because maybe the solution here for those out there is don't overcomplicate it to begin with. Just find that core group, that your super user group, your champion group, and then they themselves can push the organic growth, the organic buy-in throughout the rest of the organization. And so that initial group that you select, I think, is going to be the most important to the to the medium term, long term success, because they're the ones who are going to drive it. They're the ones who are going to showcase that these tools are superior to the ways of old, the inefficiencies of Excel and PowerPoint presentations, etc. They're the ones who are going to really showcase that.
And then I want to say that there's also another tipping point, the kind of aha moment that you get, and it's where if you can find an executive, a line of business that everybody brings PowerPoints, right? There's an addiction to PowerPoints when it comes to presenting at a exec level meeting, a board level meeting. People like making their notes, which is fine. And I think having the printouts and whatnot is valuable for maybe note taking. But when it comes to presenting the dashboard or the information or the charts that is telling the story about what's happening in business, what happens when an exec presents an anomaly, right? What's the first question everybody else around the table asks? What caused that? Why is that? What's the numbers in that point, right? So is it seasonality? Is it cyclicality? Is it an event that happened in the economy? Is it something that we have reputationally, right? Like, tell me more about that data point. And oftentimes the response is, well, I can follow up with you on that. But the aha moment is when you have a live Tableau dashboard or live Power BI dashboard, and the exec is able to click onto that point, drill into the data during the presentation and say, well, it looks like this region over here was underperforming by this percentage. And it looks like we had, this event that had occurred over here as well. And so if you do it right, if you do it well, it becomes an interactive tool that, you can find information, you can present it at a summary level, but you can drill into the details when it makes sense. And when you do that presentation one time at that level, then the exec is going to ask every one of his direct reports to be using the same tool. Otherwise, they can't get him. So it is speed to market, speed to decision when you have that interactivity, that self-service enablement. That's true self-service right there. And that's where I think when you get the organization to get there, when you get the exec level asking for it, demanding it, then that's where you have sponsorship, championship from the top down.
Couldn't agree more. Couldn't agree more. I mean, I myself have been in many over the years. Have been in many meetings showcasing, the power of these new tools, and you just get this wow. It's this constant wow. It's a new paradigm in terms of what you can do from a immersive data experience for sure. One thing that I think would be good to flow into post that is this idea of sort of data governance, but also prototyping, because I think a lot of these the new tools that we have available really I think you can actually, I personally feel like you can get into this prototyping mindset. Speed. You mentioned sort of speed as well earlier, and I think it'd be good for you to just touch on your experiences with creating prototypes, but also making sure that there's this governance layer on there as well, that you sort of don't just have 200 prototypes out there. You actually somehow get to the official report that you rubber stamp or someone rubber stamps, and then that becomes the official version of the truth.
Yeah. So in terms of governance, and I'll talk specifically about maybe our workflow, because I think the way we structure it allows exactly what you talked about, right? Like having those sign-offs, having those approvals that says that this is the official version dashboard, and this is what lives and breathes in our production environment. So, people can do whatever development they want to locally. And what's really nice about that is you can rapidly prototype, you can do ad hoc, the developer having access to their data. But we also have other environments for testing and for pre-migration to production. And so what that looks like is that you have an environment where you can have a subset of your end users come and test and look at the content. And if they verify, we have two types of what we call stewards. We have a data steward and a content steward, and they say that the data looks accurate, so one person has to sign off, and then the content says that everything format wise, the way it's calculated, this looks accurate as well, the way that's being represented. So when a developer reaches that sign-off stage and they go to put in a change request so if you've done change management with IT, typically in order to migrate content from one environment to another, you initiate some sort of ticket process. In our case, we have a change management process. We submit a change request form, or the line of business would, and that would come to our team. And before it actually comes to our team, it is submitted for approval from those two individuals. So there's that audit trail that we talked about of the sign-off saying that the data is accurate and the content is accurate, the way it's being represented. And then from there, we receive it. We do a performance evaluation to make sure it's not going to bring the server down, right? Because we're responsible for the infrastructure and architecture of the platform. And then once it validates, we migrate that content to production, which is now available for the full scope of end users, right? So with that kind of workflow, we give the control back to the line of business, but we also have some control that checks and balance, that they have done their due diligence and there's at least an audit trail that says that, yes, this is correct. So we're no longer in the business of validation. We've passed that back to the line of business, because at the end of the day, they really are the subject matter expert on their data, and they should be able to attest to that. So there's that attestation process built into the migration workflow to getting content published to production. So does that answer your question?
Yeah,
Hopefully.
definitely. So to summarize, it seems like you've got two environments. You've got the prototyping environment, and you've got the official version, official reporting version of the truth environment. And is that easier to set up technically?
We certainly have, I guess, a lot of infrastructure on the back end, and Tableau server is fairly simple to set up. It's a simple installation. It's one file executable. I think setting up the infrastructure to support it is the maybe more technical, challenging part. But having a good platform administrator or architect is definitely essential.
And when you say infrastructure, do you mean just connecting all of the raw data sources up to that server?
No, I mean the actual server itself, whether you're going to have a dedicated appliance or if it's going to be virtualized. Making sure you have those allocated cores and necessary memory and hard disk space to run the Tableau server. Because the way we run our environment, it is a shared resource environment, but we have very high specs on our servers. So we have quite a bit of capacity. At the same time, we have limits on what users can provide and submit, both in size of data, but also in performance quality. So we have certain standards that they have to abide by. And if a dashboard takes longer than 30 seconds to render or 60 seconds to render, then we have to push that back and say, hey, is there a good reason why you're bringing back this volume of data, or have you not checked your performance? Because those would be red flags that they haven't done their due diligence. So we push a lot of that stuff back to the line of business to go fix those things.
That's great. That actually is a good segue into some other thoughts that I had that would be great to dive into. Now that the business has made this sort of self-service decision, and you put more of the data analysis in the hands of the business users, historic Excel users, how have you found because obviously the analysis part is just one piece of the puzzle to achieving insights from your data, right? There's still this back end infrastructure that needs to be organized and managed. But I imagine that once you sort of just let everyone loose with self-service, there's somewhat of an underappreciation of what it takes to actually get them the data in an optimized way. And so how have you managed that challenge is sort of my follow-up question.
Well, let's just say it's an ongoing challenge. It's a never-ending challenge, I think. So there's three main, I think, data sources that we identify. So there's either enterprise data, where they're sourcing it from a warehouse environment. Maybe they're going through something like SAS or some data prep tool, or somebody producing a flat file for them, but it's coming from an enterprise data source. So in those scenarios, we want them to get closer to the source of truth, right? We don't want the intermediate levels. If necessary, we want to create a view that's specific to what they need. So if they're receiving a CSV file output, that is a weekly look back, right? So sometimes departments receive weekly batch files, and then an analyst has to pick up that file and then has to enter it in and then transform it. That wastes a lot of time. So something like that would be, maybe a star union, a wildcard union, to begin with, right? We meet them where they're at, but we want to maybe generate a view on the database that supplies that same CSV output. Because now you can point directly to the database, directly to the view, and you're always going to be the latest and greatest. You're always going to make sure that it's the same version of data. Nobody's done additional transformations without you knowing it, right? So you receive a CSV. What if the analyst put it in the wrong decimal place? during a transformation. That's never happened before, right? Like somebody didn't multiply something by 10 instead of 0.1, and you end up with the wrong value, right? So I think getting it as close to the source as possible, that handles enterprise data sources. But the other two are a little bit trickier, and that's third-party data, which is maybe files, sometimes it's API or unstructured data, like JSON. Those can be challenging, but our end goal is to try to get that source back into the enterprise. So instead of a line of business just receiving it and they only being the only users of that data, how do we get that third-party data into our enterprise environment so that now it could be potentially socialized if there's a valid use case and if it doesn't violate any licensing restrictions of that usage of data. So that's typically the scenario there. But the third one, which is really, really tricky, is user-defined data, right? That's where they have their own spreadsheet and they update it themselves, and they have values that they track from different locations, and maybe they have opinions, they have various inputs, things that change based off user input. And we do have a process for that as well. It's our user-defined data, UDD tables, and we have a application that actually houses that data, and it feeds it back into our warehouse environment. But it is structured in a way to track type 2 data, so things that change over time, that we have versioning on that data so that people can go in there and update it as they see fit, but we'll track all of those change updates. And so that's the goal, is no matter what data a line of business is using, that there is a path for them to standardize it following enterprise best practices. But in practice, we have to meet them where they're at today, get them to a state of automation where now they actually have bandwidth to pursue some of these other tasks. So in terms of value add process with self-service analytics, it is first and foremost, can we automate? Because that saves a lot of time. Automate redundant or manual processes, recurrent processes. And from there, it is, can we eliminate ad hoc reporting requirements? Because that will free up an analyst's time as well. If they can produce a dashboard that now the end user can self-consume that data, filter, segment, and drill down into the data that they need. Now the analyst doesn't have to create a custom report each time they need to answer. And then once when we get there, it's either advanced analytics or data engineering that we move that team to. So that's kind of the splitting off path of maybe the next most value add is the advanced analytics. So that might be introducing Python or R into what they're doing, or just more advanced visualizations. But we do also have that other route, and it's typically after 1 year of usage that we want them to meet with us, set up a call with data engineering team and say, hey, what are all your data sources today? We think we can help optimize, improve your process, improve your data quality by getting you closer to the source. And so we'll engage with them and try to go through one of those three paths for standardizing their data inputs.
That's great. I think that's really valuable to break it down into those three parts, because I'm sure that is common everywhere for businesses, all businesses in various different industries. One of the more recent challenges, I presume, is that a lot of the software now being embedded into organizations is a lot of the SaaS software, and a lot of those data sets, are not that easy to access in a lot of cases. You've got to sort of connect through APIs, etc. And the more that happens, the more challenging it gets, I presume. So I think being aware of it and having a bit of a process around that is vitally important. I have just a couple more questions, I think. And this has been a fantastic conversation so far. But what I think would be also really valuable, just to get an overview of, is how are you communicating with the business? Like, is there some tools that you're using? How are you, keeping that engagement up through time, and also making sure that the communication is, it's somewhat recorded. You're sticking to a plan. How are you working on that?
Yeah, so we actually have 2 monthly touch points with the entire development community, including some of those analytics leaders as well. So it's open invite for that. And one is more of a meetup where we invite a different line of business to present each month. So we give enterprise updates, announcements, what's coming up. We do 2 upgrades a year with our platforms. And so we share a lot of those updates, but we also have that line of business present and share their best practices. So we are forcing the collaboration, we are forcing the sharing of knowledge and innovation with the rest of the organization through that. We spotlight them, we do everything we can to promote them so that it is a good use of their time. But it's typically the folks that are doing things that are very, very successful, or they have a great use case, and we want to highlight their success. So this is a platform and opportunity for them to showcase their work. The other is a tech talk. So we have a more technical forum once a month, which is a deep dive into a tool, capability, functionality, or even sometimes psychology, right? Like of how do you design, how do you visualize things? How does human behavior, natural instincts play into how we should design a dashboard? So we have all these variety of different topics, and we have different subject matter experts that will present on those topics. So some of those are internal, some of them are external to share those best practices. I think those 2 have been phenomenal in maintaining our community and really sharing that knowledge out there. The other things that we do that are more, I think, maintenance oriented is we have a weekly site admin meeting. So that's a checkpoint with everybody who is a site admin. So because it's self-service, each team has their own site, they control their own governance, and those are really the champions for each line of business. So the goal is every line of business will have a site admin one day, and they'll all attend this weekly meeting. And it's really a place where you tell us if something's broken, because we don't know what's happening on every single site. And it's really hard for us to manage that. So if they become the first line of defense, if their developers are having issues, if their end user are having issues, they will troubleshoot and fix as many of that as possible for their end users. But if there's any issues that they can't solve, they escalate it to us. So that site admin meeting is really that escalation point of, hey, this is what's happening. And it's also, we can communicate information back to them. So that has become its own community, but it's only a 30-minute stand-up on a weekly basis. And then the other maintenance component that we have is we have a weekly doctor's hours, which is similar to like an open office hours. But the idea is that any developer having development challenges can submit into a question log. And then at the end of the week, we have an hour set aside where we just go through and provide advice, like a deep dive consultative, or help them build something right there on the live webinar. And anybody and everybody can attend that. And some people just attend just to watch and see what we advise, what other people are dealing with, and others come because they have a challenge that they're trying to solve. And so that too has become a really collaborative environment, because sometimes we don't have the answers. Sometimes another developer has a better solution. And so I think it's a great collaborative experience.
Great. And I think that's some super advice. It seems like you have this very regular cadence of events. I presume most of them are virtual, especially these days. to maintain that engagement, to maintain that to buy-in in terms of what you're doing. So, just what sort of do you have like a Slack channel? Like, how are you keeping everyone aware? Is it Teams, is Microsoft Teams, or is it some other communication tool like Yammer or something?
No, we have a SharePoint site that's our
SharePoint.
primary way of managing content, and then we have WebEx for hosting our webinar. So it's just a meeting invite, and if anybody that's new to our site or community, we have all those calendar invites right there on the SharePoint site, so they can download themselves. We try to make it self-service for them, even to get content from us, because we're a small team, we're a lean team, and we want to make sure that we're able to leverage the technology and the resources that we have available to make sure that everybody has access to what they need. So that's really been our approach. How do we enable our end users to serve themselves, even for getting access to technology and the resources that they need to be successful?
Right. You mentioned just earlier as well around sort of a ticketing system. What software or technology do you use for that to funnel the requests in a efficient way?
Yeah, so the enterprise platform that's for that, we use a technology called ServiceNow, and I think it's fairly common across a lot of different industries, but it may vary from what their presence is where you're located. So I'm not sure if it's widely adopted. But yeah, it's typically an IT management type software, and you can deploy it to manage change request tickets and a variety of different types of requests.
Okay, right. So that's been a historic technology that's been around for a while, and you've just integrated the BI strategy and process management into that.
That's right. Yeah.
Great. Okay. Well, how about one last question before we round out, because we've covered a lot of great topics today, I think. Is there any other unique insights you think that you've seen that we haven't talked about around your center of excellence that you've developed? Obviously you're unique in many ways. One is that you're a very large organization in the financial industry. You're in a merger. Anything else you think that would be valuable for our listeners, and that you could bring a unique perspective to?
I think, and we've touched on this a little bit, but I think it is more about driving the culture of people wanting to do this, do self-service analytics, and if you don't have that culture of innovation, if you don't have that buy-in from people, if things are feeling stagnant, you have to go back in and discover why that is before you can make any type of change, right? So the change starts with the mindset and the beliefs of the people, and so we introduced a new tool. We created a buzz around that. We used that as a catalyst, as I said before, but it wasn't really about the tool. It was the fact that we were enabling and then allowing being maybe the key point there, these teams to do what they've always wanted to do, and gave them the means to do it, right? We gave them the permission to do it with this tool, so they had our blessing to do that. They would have done it anyways if we did not come in with a strategy, with a plan to do it, right? So that's the thing. People will go and use whatever they have available to do what they need to do. But if you come in there and you meet them where they're at, you come in with a plan, a strategy, that's something that can unify the organization, and you can guide them. You give them that vision of what it looks like on the other side. If they go on this road with you, then you're going to be very successful in rolling this out and implementing. But if you approach it and say, this is the way we're going to do things, this is another IT driven solution, and this is another plan that we've mastermind to help you with your analytics, I think you're going to be met with a lot of resistance. So as much as possible, meet with the people, talk with the people, understand their pain points. I think it's maybe basic to change management, but it's worth saying that you should be in tune with your end users at the end of the day.
Yeah, I think that's brilliant. At the end of the day, you've got to do a bit of selling yourself, right? You've got to almost sort of sell the dream of what's possible with this new toolkit, this new sort of model of data management, etc. And it definitely sounds like yourself and your team is well on that journey and well on the way to succeeding, significantly, very, very well. Well, why don't we wrap things up there, Alex? This was a brilliant conversation. Lots of different and new ideas that I have no doubt the listeners of this podcast will get a lot of value from. Obviously, by the scenario that you're dealing with, with your large organization and the merger, etc. Just so many great insights that I think we talked about today. So really appreciate your time.
Fantastic. Thanks for having me, Sam.
Okay, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. And Alex, once again, thanks so much for being on. And don't forget to subscribe to the podcast. Plenty more great conversations to come out. We're really just getting started. It's an exciting initiative for us. So looking forward to getting those out to you as soon as possible. Okay, thanks everyone. Talk to you soon.